Welcome to Beyond Bite Wings, the business side of dentistry, brought to you by Edwards and Associates PC. Join us as we discuss how to build your dental practice, optimize your income, and plan for your future. This podcast is distributed with the understanding that Edwards and Associates PC is not rendering legal, accounting, or professional advice. Listeners should consult with their business advisors before acting on any of the information that is shared. At Edwards and Associates PC, our business is the business of dentistry. For help or more information, visit our website at enassociates.com. Hello and welcome to another episode of Beyond Bite Wings. My name is Ash, and in today's episode, we have a very special guest. Her name is Dr. Ruth Mannschreck. She's a dentist herself. And in today's episode, we decided why not have someone from our community share a little bit on the process of transition. I'm sure every now and then, especially for practice owners, we have certain questions that come up. And with all the information out there, it's hard to know which information may apply to you. So without further ado, Dr. Mannschreck, how are we doing today?
Excellent. I'm so glad to be here with you, Ash. This is great. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, of course. The pleasure's all mine. So in today's episode, how would you like to start it off?
I'd like to talk about one of the big mistakes I made in my practice. I was in private practice for 36 or 37 years, and we had a really tight little system going. It's going great. And two of my colleagues approached me about buying my practice, caught me by surprise, a little off guard, and I didn't do enough preparation when I went into the sale of my practice. And afterwards, I realized that I'd left a lot of money on the table because I wasn't prepared, because I hadn't thought about what my practice looked like to a potential buyer. I bought another practice. Second time around, it was a much different story. When you go to a broker, they're going to look at certain pretty specific details about your practice, but there's so much more to making your practice winsome or really attractive to a certain kind of buyer that no one ever mentioned to me before I went into the transaction. I encourage docs or all professionals in private practice to plan way ahead before you ever get to the point where your practice is ready to sell financially from a numbers point of view. You want to get your practice ready to sell from an operations or a team culture leadership point of view. So two different timetables there.
I see. So I think the key thing here is planning proactively, taking the necessary amount of time and not rushing through the process.
Right. I like to have docs start off with, what do you want out of your selling your practice? What are your non-negotiables? Do you want to stay on and practice? Do you want to run and hit the slopes to ski or be on the beach or play golf, or what would you like to do? That's a huge part of running the transaction so that it's a win-win for both you and the buyer. And in our excitement, in the enthusiastic energy of getting a practice ready to sell or going through the motions of the transaction, we often don't think enough about what am I going to do after. I find a lot of my clients, much of their identity is wrapped up in their practice, and they can't imagine a world where they aren't the doc. They aren't the owner, the founder of their practice. So I encourage people to take a moment, decide what do you want. You have a lot more control over the sale of your practice than you probably think at this moment in time. The first thing I like to have them look at their practice and think, how can I increase the value of my practice? Not just from numbers point of view, the finances of your practice. But what else do you have in your practice that's for sale or that you are offering to an incoming doc? It's kind of a Goldilocks situation. It's not
Mm,
that it's not that it's always a good idea. It's not that it's always a good idea to look for the buyer with the deepest pockets who's going to pay you the most. A lot of our identity is wrapped up in our patients and our team members. So who's going to take the best care of your patients the way you want it done? Who's going to take the best care of your team members the way that you want, the way the culture of your practice says, this is how we do things. This is how we care for. This is what we're known for. So I encourage people to think about how can I increase the value? Meaning think about your team, think about your systems, how you do things, think about the culture. And of course, you're going to think about the patients that you have, think about the capacity that you have available in your practice, in your schedule, in your charts. I purchased a practice, didn't look at the charts, and everyone in the practice had a mouthful of gold. There was no work to be done. Periodontal disease kept me from failing in that second endeavor. But it's wise to look at the capacity of the patients and of the team before you decide you're ready to sell. I think
mm,
the second area that I would encourage people to look at in their practice is how can I decrease the risk of my practice to the buyer? Buyers tend to look very critically for risk factors, and you want to mitigate those as best you can. If depending on, so for example, who are the rainmakers in your practice? Is the owner doc the face of the practice in a community? Is someone on your hygiene team the star as far as bringing additional work out of the hygiene chair and into the doc's schedule? You don't want that to be too unbalanced because the buyer looks at over dependency in just about any category, but over dependency on where work comes from, where patients come from. So if you have a dominant rainmaker within your team, you're going to want to shore that up somehow with either increasing the productivity or the ability of team members to bring people into your practice. So that it's not because if that hygienist that's so good at finding additional work leaves the practice when the owner leaves, buyers worry about that, you know? Another thing, if your referral base comes from a very limited number of professionals, that also is going to come across as a red flag. It's a risk, an area of risk. So broadening your referral base, deepening the bench of the people who routinely refer the right kind of patients to your practice is a good way to calm the fears of buyers who are looking at risk when they look at your practice. Does that make sense?
oh yeah, absolutely. On that note, I was thinking because you did mention is the owner doctor one of the primary rainmakers, and I'm wondering what if a practice has a name
I
with the
know.
owner's name, right? Like Jane Doe Dentistry.
I know. Where I practiced, it was everyone. My name was on the door. There wasn't a name it wasn't a clinic. So yes, I tell students that I mentor to think about, come up with a name for your practice that doesn't involve your personal name because a face on a brand is much harder to sell than a name of a company on a brand when you're trying to market it. So yeah, that does make sense. But we come from an old tradition of, boy, I go see Dr. Ruth and I'm only going to see her and that's the way it is. So it's a different world for the young people coming out of dental school
Mhm.
to look at that. And I think they're wise to think about coming up with a name. I don't want you to sound like a big box dental office. but a name will be much easier to promote as far as finding the right buyer.
And
Yeah.
then regarding the culture, I'm assuming that you were talking about the fit check, especially if you've cared about your team members, you want to make sure the practice goes to someone who can continue that culture, can continue maintaining some of the systems that were already in place and be able to maintain their collections up to that level that the business is used to. Is there a way for sellers to meet the potential buyer even before the LOI is sent in?
For the owner or the team?
For the seller to meet the potential buyer.
That's a very interesting question. And it truly depends on which broker you talk to, whether they approve or disapprove. And I feel this is where I may go against the big stream of consciousness in most industries. What I find is typical is docs will finish the transaction on Friday, get everything finished Monday morning. You walk in and the first thing you do is tell your team, I just sold the practice. I think that's the wrong way. That's backwards. What if we told our team members 10 years ahead of time, I'm going to sell this practice at some point, and I'm going to design the practice and I'm going to promote the practice with the idea that my team, runs such a well-oiled machine, a cash-generating machine, that whoever buys the practice is going to want to keep you on because you're part of the machine that runs without me as the owner doc.
Wow.
That way, I know that goes against all kinds of things, but I felt irresponsible because I did that. When I sold my first practice, I did that. I told everybody Monday morning and I felt horrible. It was awful. I will never do that again. And I couldn't come up with a way to ease them into it. And finally, I just said, let's start way back 10 years before you want to sell. Get your team on board with the idea that, yes, the doc is going to take care of us. So I'm going to put my heart and soul into this practice because I know I get to stay when the practice is sold. It's a whole different. And the next step that one of my clients took this even a step further was, we want the team to have the potential owner come through the practice, interview the existing team, come on a day, watch how our process works, watch how we care for patients, have a sit down, talk to team members. And then after the potential buyer left, they had a debrief with the team, and the team scored the potential buyer about how they thought it would be to run a practice with them.
Oh, that is fantastic.
Isn't that
Truly,
wonderful?
that is wonderful. That is truly utilizing the word team and actually respecting their title as a team member. We're all in it
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. I love that idea. So sorry, that was a long story to get to the answer to your question. But yes, I do want those parties in conversation, and I want to include the team in that. It works in so many different industries, and I have seen it work in dentistry, and I think it's fabulous. It's a whole different outlook, and you have to talk a broker into doing it. But I just think it's a fabulous way to respect your team and to, I was talking about decreasing risk. This is a huge way to decrease risk for your buyer.
Oh, yeah, I could easily see that. I mean, if you can tell the potential buyer that my team already knows, in fact, they're open for you to come in and talk to them, I mean, that would be a big green flag for me.
That's been a huge thing for me. And I know only one of the brokers I love my brokers. I work with a bunch of brokers. Only one of them actually embraces that idea. And I understand confidentiality is such a huge piece of selling, but I just want people to think a little differently. It's outside the box. Just say, I don't have to do it this way. I can respect my team. Now, means you have to have a pretty on the ball team. to pull that off. So we went through two things that you want to increase the value, you want to decrease your risk. The third thing I want people to look at is, what is your competitive advantage? Dentistry to our patients, or to patients who don't have a dental office at the moment, dentistry looks like a commodity. And we don't want that. We want the flavor of our practice. We want the culture, our team, to be distinctive and represent something that patients value. I know as a doc, we set up our culture based around our core values that are important to us, the doc, and our team. And I ask my clients to add, when you're thinking competitive advantage, add to that, how are you solving the needs, the wants, the fears of your outside audience, so to speak, people who aren't your patients yet? That competitive advantage goes a long way in the world of selling. Otherwise, you're a commodity. You're something, especially if you're a solo or a small group in private practice, you're a commodity to be scooped up by a big box and added to their, and that goes against everything. If you're in a small private practice by choice, that's not where you want to send your patients after you're gone.
That's right.
It's not a good match of culture or design. Business model is different. It's a whole different piece. So again, you get to be Goldilocks. When you have a practice to sell, you want to make sure that buyer matches what your intent is for caring for your patients moving forward. So I call that competitive advantage. We don't always think of that in dentistry, but we should. We spend so much time building our reputation. That's what competitive advantage is, in part.
Now, it's so wonderful to get a perspective from a dentist, because as soon as I heard the word competitive advantage, here I am, probably because of my profession, I was thinking of numbers. Like, how can a practice have some competitive advantage? Like, are you offering employee benefit packages to your employees to lower the turnover compared to maybe the other competitors, or the location itself?
Right.
Like, in an urban area or a rural area, how close are you competitors? Are you a general practitioner, a dentist, or a specialist? But patient, not once did that come to my mind.
Yeah. But you have to have a reason for your practice to look different than anybody else's from an emotional point of view. You know, your draw, most people buy based on emotion and their CPA's little mark of approval, but so much has to do with the emotional component of competitive advantage. And I think that's very important. If you don't want to leave either your patients or your team in the dust after the transaction. So that's something that I did not care for before I sold my first practice. So it's just messy, you know, and I've had brokers say, but every sale is messy. It just is. And I think I want to think about, how can I not let it be so messy? How can I care for more of the loose ends before the transaction, and do it with my team so that they appreciate the fact that I am considering all the involved parties, because in my mind, your team is a huge piece of the involved parties in a transaction like that. And the last area that I tell people to look at is to make sure that your practice is what I call turnkey easy. If you are a doc who sees patients all day long and then is in the office until 8 o'clock at night doing all the practice administration things, you're not really selling a practice, you're selling a job. And that's not very attractive to just about any kind of buyer, unless you have a newbie who is looking to buy a practice instead of build a practice to start with, which is not a bad idea. But otherwise, it's really hard to sell a job. And I don't think dentists take a look at, how do I run my practice If I wasn't there, how would the practice run? How much of the day-to-day of the office could carry on without me? Dentists find that out when they have a skiing accident and they're out of the office for months. But I like to be prepared for things like that instead. So, how turnkey is your team? How long could they run the practice without you? Not from the handpiece point of view, but from the practice management part.
Mm.
How long could they do that without you? Because I see a lot of messy professional offices where the doc is part of everything. And that's not attractive, I'm finding, to buyers.
Mm. You actually raise an interesting point there because just yesterday, I actually had a meeting with a client of ours that's been practicing for 15 plus years. And she's finally ready to sell her practice. But one of the biggest issues we've been running with that transition is that she has a hard time delegating tasks. She does not want to let go of control, even
Mm-hmm.
at a time of transition. She's
Hmm.
just worried that the new owner will not be able to run the show the way she did.
Right.
That's because she's been doing a lot of that work.
Yeah. And yes, we know dentists we're raised to examine and to think forward, to play chess in how we care for our patients. We look for problems here so they don't turn into problems there. And we just examine, we critique everything. And it's hard to shut that off because that's so much of what we learned in school, and so much of what we do all day is critiquing our work, other people's work, and how we run our practice. So it's hard to stop doing that. So back to the when should I think about selling my practice? It's like years and years ahead of time because you have to stop doing that. You have to you have to have someone help you stop doing that and think of all the reasons why. Are you not confident in your team? Are you uncertain of the results that you'll get? Are they not properly trained? Are they not properly inspired? That's usually the part that gets the doc, is that they're not going to care for it as much as I do. So how can you teach your team to care for your practice as much as you do? They won't get completely there, but they'll get a long, long way.
Yeah. So part of it is learning new ways of doing things
Mm-hmm.
and being open to changes.
Yeah. And I encourage docs, I coach with other professions too. It's not just dentists, but attorneys, chiropractors, veterinarians, we all, professionals in private practice, we have a hard time letting go. We are in private practice because we wanted to do things our way, of course. And that makes it really hard because we don't think anybody else can do that. But looking forward, in a realistic point of view, you can't keep doing that. So what's the least painful way to get to the point where you can put your blessing on how your team runs your practice? What was that entail? And that's where you got to start. That takes time. So you got to start a long time before you actually want to sell. You got to build your team so that they can run that practice well, and you can step aside without it being painful like that.
I agree. Absolutely. And I think it also broadens your scope of potential buyers, not just
Yeah.
private buyers, but certain DSO type, big boxes. They oftentimes want to ask you, okay, who's your point of contact at your practice? If
Hmm?
you're that person, if you're planning on selling, that's not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. We just don't think about it. We practice, 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 and then, oh, look, my numbers are good. My retirement's all lined up. Let's pull the trigger. Well, you haven't thought about all the other things that don't translate into numbers in a P&L
Mhm.
or a balance sheet. I encourage people, start today to look at your team, to look at your systems, look at your culture, and look at the way you lead your team. These are all reasons why we should have another conversation about how to run a practice that doesn't require you, the doc, for all that stuff. It's a great conversation, and it sets you up once you have your practice designed in a way that it can run itself without you. Makes it much easier to sell later on.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I would even imagine if you're a family person, that would also free up a lot of your time to maintain a better work-life balance.
It is. That is the biggest complaint that professionals come to me with is, I have a successful practice. I have a great practice. Love my business. Hate my job. I have no life, So, yeah. And all the work you do to set yourself up to not working so many hours is the perfect segue into, now my practice is ready to sell, because I know it's self-sufficient. It can carry on with someone else holding the handpiece, but the culture is set. The leadership style is set. My team knows how to lead this practice. We're just swapping out who's holding the handpiece. And I love that business model.
Yeah, no, I would have to agree. In fact, you know what? I'm also thinking maybe we do need to do a second episode with you where we share with our audience about that.
I'd love that. That would be good.
Well, you definitely shared a lot of helpful tips with our listeners. And you've actually opened my eyes as well to think more about the qualitative side of a transition and not just the quantitative side.
Right.
So thank you for that.
And I have a gift for your listeners if they're interested, if they'd like an overall, like a checklist of things to look at before your practice is ready to sell. It's called Prep It Now. And if they go to prepitnow.com, they'll get, it's just a checklist of things to look at before you decide it's time to sell this practice.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. That will be so helpful.
Yeah.
All right. Well, is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners? Maybe your contact information, just in case if they have more questions.
If they go to prepitnow.com, they'll be able to get that free resource, and they'll be added to our email list so they can connect with me that way. That's the easiest way. I'm on LinkedIn, and my company name is Shoreline Strategies. So shorelinestrategies.com is our website. And we're on Instagram too.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again, Dr. Mannschreck.
Yeah. Very nice. I'm so glad we had a conversation. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening today. Be sure to subscribe to Beyond by Wings on your favorite podcast platform. For more information, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, or reach out to us on our website. You can also shoot us an email at info@eandassociates.com.